Welcome to Murder Mile. Today, I'm standing on the Bayswater Road, W2, 2 streets east of the stabbing of Stanley Thurman, 3 streets southeast of the final night of Emmy Werner, a short walk from the torture of Vincent Carey, and 3 streets west of the dark secrets of Orme Court. Coming soon to Murder Mile. Overlooking Hyde Park is Falmouth House, an 8-storey square block of posh flats for the cash-rich and the tax-shy, built in 1960. Made of brown brick with white sills and jutting balconies, it resembles the kind of place that a sports pundit would put up his feet, having spent 90 whole minutes telling millions of football fans just what they've seen. Where a dodgy politician secretes his secretary he's not so secretly shagging. And where a slew of proud-to-be British bankers bonk their loot, having bet that the pound will collapse, as yet another bafflingly inept Prime Minister of the Week cripples our currency by being utterly shit. Flat 35, a 2-bedroomed flat on the 5th floor with views over Hyde Park, cost £20,000. Today, it's selling for $3.3 million. Paying for the location, but also to be secure. There are buzzers to let you in, keys to let you out, intercoms to screen any strangers, cameras to watch for weirdos, a service bell if you need help, and 24-hour porters who know the names and faces of every resident. In August 1967, 2 newlyweds, Michael O'Carroll, a stockbroker, and Janet Williams, a model, moved into Flat 35. This stylish apartment, in a secure building in a well-to-do neighbourhood, was to be their forever home. On Tuesday the 12th of March 1968, the flat was burgled. But being a half-baked robbery by a band of incompetents, with a hastily concocted plan to solve an easily rectifiable problem, being so inept and ill-equipped for such a petty crime, their idiocy would lead to a double murder. My name is Michael. I'm your tour guide. This is Murder Mile. Episode 195. In Too Deep, Part 2. A plan doesn't need to be much to ensure it doesn't go all arse about tit. It's simple. A little research, some common sense, a dash of patience, a solid leader, and a team with experience and skill. It's not foolproof. Nothing is. But anything is better than 3 bumbling idiots of mind-numbing stupidity. Michael St. John O'Carroll was a 53-year-old partner at Carroll & Co., a successful city stockbrokers. Being smart, confident, and a risk-taker, his business was solid, but as the industry is, unpredictable. As a stylish gent, he wore sharp suits from Savile Row, drove a flash Lancia convertible, ate in only the finest restaurants, and holidayed on private islands. With his work having dominated his world, his family life had suffered. In early 1967, having separated from his wife Claire, he left behind their 2 sons aged 16 and 19, their home, a modern detached house overlooking Wimbledon Park, and the divorce proceedings were pending. As a high-powered businessman, with so much to gain or lose within the blink of an eye, few people knew of his problems, as he often hid them behind a cheeky grin, a jocular laugh, and a light-hearted dig at himself. The biggest secret he harboured, though, was that he was lonely. Born in West Hyde, 7 miles outside Hereford, Janet Alice Williams was the second youngest of 3 daughters and 2 sons, who came from humble beginnings. With her dad George working at a parcel delivery depot, these hard-working parents ensured their children were well educated, and therefore Janet, as the school prefect, graduated in 1958 from Bromyard Grammar with 6 O-levels. Gifted with maternal nature, it was no surprise that she worked as an auxiliary nurse at Hereford County Hospital. And later, she retrained as an English and PE teacher at several schools in St John's Wood, Croydon and East London. She was making a good life for herself, but her ambitions were much bigger. Being blonde, pretty and petite, Janet Williams had been screen tested at Pinewood Studios, with her dream to break into films and TV, and with her agent describing her as a beautiful girl with perfect features and a slim figure. She was well on her way to securing a £10,000 a year contract as a model. It's uncertain when it happened, but having lost interest in her modelling career, whilst working as an escort girl, 25-year-old Janet Williams met 53-year-old Michael O'Carroll, and the two fell in love. To say it was a whirlwind romance would be an understatement. But with his divorce petition not due to be heard until the 31st of March, 5 months earlier, they'd secretly married in Rome until they could be legally married under English law. They had honeymooned at his villa on the Mediterranean island of Elba, and in September 1967, they'd moved into a stylish and elegant flat at Falmouth House on the Bayswater Road. Although a few months pregnant, Michael and Janet took lessons at the Arthur Murray School at 167 Oxford Street, supervised by Mr. David Bolton, an instructor of tango, rumba and the polka, who Janet knew from when she was a nightclub hostess. It was a romantic dance, destined to mark the birth of their wonderful life together. And yet it was the seed which sowed the start of their agonizing deaths. "30-year-old David Colvin Bolton had made a modest living as a dance instructor, and he lived with his wife in a small flat above a shop at 79 High Road in South Tottenham. Having lost his job at the Arthur Murray School for reasons unknown, his landlord had taken him to court for being £50 in rent arrears and had given him 28 days to pay. Otherwise, he would be evicted. As a cocky lad who despised the rich but wanted wealth, like so many petty criminals who resorted to stealing rather than working hard, Dave, as he liked to be called, often had a get-rich scam on the go, of which he was the mastermind. Sorry, did I say mastermind? I meant moron. Dave was all mouth and no trousers. A wannabe Mr. Big who would bulldoze his ill-conceived schemes like a cow hijacking a milk float. fueled by anger and jealousy. This bargain basement Buster Edwards only ever thought of the loot. And in short, he couldn't organise an orgy in a busy brothel. Barely 6 months before the robbery, Dave had unwittingly begun recruiting his gang. To ensure his success, he could have browsed the Big Book of London Bad Lads to view a few hoods well versed in breaking and entering. But instead, he opted for 2 desperate dickheads without a brain cell apiece. Michael David Ellis was a 22-year-old unemployed swimming instructor from Putney, who sometimes fenced stolen items and nicked checkbooks. But if you mentioned his name to the Met Police, they'd be likely to reply, "Who?" He dressed like a flashy wanker and blew his cash faster than a wrinkling wag. And just 2 weeks before the robbery, needing a third man, as possibly they didn't feel that 2 dense numpties were enough to bungle a simple burglary, they roped in a pal of Mike's called Ray. Raymond David Cohen was a 23-year-old unemployed trainee football coach who still lived at home with his dad in Wandsworth. Being a skinny, bespectacled lad who was easily led, he dressed well and he spoke well. But he had about as much experience of burglary as a blind hermit with agoraphobia. And this was the gang: Dave, Mike and Ray. 3 instructors of dancing, swimming and football. You may think I'm overemphasizing their criminal incompetence for comic effect. But I'm not. On Monday the 11th of March 1968, Dave, Mike and Ray set out to burgle a sub-post office off the Great West Road just beside Brentford Football Ground. Based on Dave's precision planning, and yes, I'm being sarcastic, they would break into the house of a sub-postmaster, steal his keys to the safe, swipe all of his loot, not only cash but also stamps, coupons and postal orders, and then speed away unseen. But having blown an hour bumbling around this unoccupied house with the lights off and only one torch between them, they couldn't find the key. So having left empty-handed, they drove back to Dave's flat in Tottenham, having wasted a few shillings on fuel and wrecked Dave's dodgy brakes and rattling exhaust. At 4 a.m, in the early hours of Tuesday the 12th of March, Dave, Mike and Ray, being less of a Pink Panther and more of a moth-eaten mauve moggy, decided they needed a simpler job for their simpler brains. Being tired, hungry, high on adrenaline, and having barely slept in 24 hours, Dave, the man with the plan, suggested a robbery he had mooted a few days before. The target was a wealthy stockbroker who lived with his wife in a stylish Bayswater flat. They had money, jewellery, cash, and 2 cars. Dave knew this as a fact, as he had already seen inside the flat. As just 2 weekends prior, Mr. and Mrs. O'Carroll had a little drink soiree at Falmouth House, of which their dance instructor was a guest. He hadn't twigged it at the time, but given access via the side door's intercom, he had swiftly entered, unbothered through the entrance hall, past the porter, up in the lift to the 5th floor, and with the door to flat 35 opened without hesitation by Janet, who had seen his face through the spy hole. He knew that she liked him, she would open the door to him, and that during the day she would be alone. The plan was simple. Get in, grab the loot, and get out. What could go wrong? Nothing. Except being sleep deprived. They'd planned to commit their brazen heist in barely 7 hours' time, leaving no space to rehearse, plan, or prepare for something they had never done before. They had no tools, no bags, no binds, no gags, no gloves, no overalls, and worse still, no disguises. As well as no backup plan should anything or everything go wrong. And no escape plan. Apart from that, it was perfect. Tuesday the 12th of March began as uneventful as any other for Mr. and Mrs. O'Carroll. Wearing a grey three-piece suit, Michael left for work at 8 a.m. in his silver Lancia. Dressed in mauve slacks and a blue checkered shirt, Janet would have a leisurely morning. As being 5 months pregnant, she was starting to show. But at 1 p.m. that day, they would meet for lunch as planned. At 11:10 a.m., arriving in 2 cars for no logical reason, Ray parked his rattly Austin Healey at a parking meter on Clarendon Place, within sight of the side entrance to Falmouth House. Whereas Dave, who knew Janet, parked his very discreet canary yellow console several streets away. Why? We have no idea. The robbery seemed like a sure thing. Ray would later state,
"At the front of the flats, we didn't need to call the intercom because a man was delivering furniture."
Entering, all 3 were dressed in dark, mismatched suits like wartime spiffs, only with nothing to hide their identity. No wigs, no beards, no glasses. And being a bitterly cold morning, not even hats or scarves. Inside reception, greeted by the porter Joseph Buckley, when he asked,
"What flat do you want?"
Like massive idiots, they replied,
"Flat 35, O'Carroll."
As burglars always tell security who they plan to rob. Having gained entry to the lift, the plan was simple.
We proceeded up to floor 5.
Where Dave got out, rang the bell for flat 35, and was let in as expected by Janet.
We intended to go up 1 floor and then come back down again to the 5th, giving Dave enough time.
But being bamboozled by its buttons, the lift returned to the ground floor, where they were again greeted by the bemused porter.
"What flat do you want?"
Jabbing button 5 until the doors shut again, Ray and Mike returned to the 5th to begin the burglary.
We rang the bell. Mrs. O'Carroll answered it, and Mike asked for Dave. "Is Dave there, please?"
Opening the door,
She looked surprised. Before she could say anything, Dave come up behind her, put his hands around her mouth and dragged her back into the lounge. Thereupon, we entered and locked the door behind us.
Inside of flat 35, this spacious 2-bedroomed apartment was elegant, stylish, and it sparkled with goods they could easily fence. A colour telly, a deluxe radiogram, and an ornate drinks trolley. but knowing that these were too big to lug about. With no bags for the swag, their smartest move was to fill their pockets with cards, cash, checks, car keys. And as David said,
her jewellery alone is worth 10 to 15 grand.
With the robbery going okay, as Dave tied Janet's ankles and wrists, as her dance instructor reassured her,
"Sit down and no one will harm you."
She believed him as she knew him.
Mike and I looked around and found some jewellery, some cash, a Barclay card, a checkbook, a Harrods card, and a set of keys for her Mini. She also said that she had a lunch appointment with her husband at 1 p.m,
which gave the robbers an hour at best.
I noticed a pill bottle in the bedroom, and I assumed that she was pregnant.
Not being monsters, they kept her calm. They let her sit in the comfy lounge chair, and they reassured her that they'd be in and out in minutes. That was the plan they had agreed to barely a few hours before. But it was then that the plan changed. All in, Dave thought they could probably nick 20, maybe 30 grand's worth of stuff, which today would be a cool £250,000. Only Dave was not a jeweller. He was a ballroom dancer who couldn't tell a 24-carat diamond from a cracked marble. So instead of get in, grab it and get out as planned, he wanted to wait for the loot to be examined by an expert. At 12:15 p.m, Ray was sent to see a fence called Harry Rutter at 11 Kenway in Earl's Court.
For a diamond ring, a checkbook, a Barclay card, a Harrods card, a pearl necklace, a dress ring, a pendant watch, a pair of cultured pearl earrings, an Omega watch and a bracelet.
He expected a sizable wad of notes. But as most of it was second-hand, fake, and the cards and checks were in Janet's name. And in the 1960s, as few women had bank accounts, that made these items almost impossible to shift. Instead of getting tens of thousands in cash,
Harry gave us 220 quid.
Split between three, it sorted out Dave's debt. But robbers don't do a heist to clear their overdraft. At 1:30 p.m, holding an embarrassingly thin stack of tenors, driving his rattly Austin Healey,
I took my car over to a Muse garage to get my brakes realigned and a new exhaust.
leaving this dunce-hatted band of desperados with only one getaway car for this half-witted heist. Inside flat 35, with Janet still tied up and gagged, Ray grabbed himself a drink.
I think it was a scotch.
Before he dispensed the bad news and handed his dejected pals a floppy pile of 7 tenors each. And that was it. Cutting their losses, they could have left right then by blackmailing Janet or threatening to hurt her husband if she ever went to the police. But again, Dave changed the plan.
The phone rang, but nobody answered it. Dave said it had rung before. 5 minutes later, it rang again. Dave thought it was Mr. O'Carroll phoning because his wife had met him for lunch. It was then presumed that he would return home. So we took it in turns, watching through the door spy-hole.
As a city stockbroker who wore fancy suits, gold watches, and drove a silver sports car, they knew the second that he saw his pregnant wife tied up and gagged, He would give them access to his bulging bank account if they promised to let her go. At little after 2 p.m, Michael entered flat 35.
Jan? Jan, you okay, love?
Dave grabbed him from behind, tied him up with ties and tights taken from the bedroom, and threatened him with a carving knife taken from the kitchen.
Stay quiet, and no one will harm you.
Of his wrist, Dave took a Vertex watch, later sold for £10. From his pocket, he took £5 in notes and gave the wallet back.
Dave then proceeded in asking Mr. O'Carroll to give him money.
Access to his cards, his bank accounts, everything. Otherwise, Janet would be hurt. This threat should have made him white with fear. But all it did was make him red with shame. Pending a divorce, with 2 mortgages, a new wife, an ex-wife-to-be, 2 teenage boys, and a baby on the way, he'd got nothing. In fact, he'd got less than nothing. Michael was £3,000 in debt, £61,000 today. And so with everything having gone to shit, their twice-changed plan had to change. Again. With the bank account inaccessible, the jewels worth little, and the cards and checks having caused ructions with the fence, who now demanded his money back as the police were starting to sniff about. All this incompetent gang of slightly sleepy arseholes had left was 2 almost new cars. A 1966 2-year-old Mini bought for £680, and a 1964 4-year-old Lancia Flavia convertible bought for £1,900. But there lied another cock-up. Owing to the city traffic, these dim-witted dingleberries hadn't twigged that Michael had driven into work in his Lancia. But keen to get back quickly, he had taken the tube back to his Bayswater flat, leaving his car 3.5 miles away. Taking the Mini's keys, as well as Janet's driving license, proof of ownership, and the car's logbook. At 3:30 p.m, Mike Ellis drove the Mini around town to try and flog it off to some car dealers who he knew. Anxiously waiting, as their payday had been a disaster, Dave and Ray paced around the flat, keeping tabs on their hostages, and wondering how their half-baked plan, concocted just a few hours earlier, had gone so spectacularly wrong. Being tired and hungry, Ray would later state,
I cooked a dinner for Janet and myself. She had a couple of eggs in rye vita, and I had some corn on the cob.
And to while away the time, the gang had a drink, a smoke, and popped on some music, touching everything with their bare hands. Only that hour spent waiting would be time wasted. Mike couldn't sell this nearly new mint-condition Mini for love nor money.
A car dealer in Kingston had offered me 250 quid, but rejected the offer as apparently there were too many irregularities.
Like Mike Ellis wanted the money in cash, he wanted it today. And he couldn't explain why, if this was his wife's car, why the owner was called Janet O'Carroll. En route, Mike fenced the Vertex watch to Harry Rutter. but getting into a spat with him about the bank card in Janet's name.
I had to pay him back a tenner from the 220 quid he'd already given us.
At roughly 4:30 p.m, as Ray had done just 3 hours earlier, Mike returned empty-handed. Over the next few hours, from their minuscule haul of just £210, Dave paid back his landlord, Mike stayed in a few West End hotels, and Ray got a touts ticket to see Chelsea beat Sheffield Wednesday 2-0. The only piece of luck that Ray had was getting the Lancia, as although it was in a secure car park, the parking ticket was on the dashboard, the doors were unlocked, and the keys were in the ignition. The new plan was to meet later at Dave's flat and to work out where and how they would sell the Lancia. While Ray watched football, Dave and Mike sat alone in flat 35, wondering how to get themselves out of this complete and utter mess. With Janet and Michael O'Carroll tied up and gagged, the inexperience of this dance instructor and trainee football coach shone through. As what can you do with two hostages that you can't extort for money and you can't blackmail into silence, who both know your names and your faces? Nothing. At 10 p.m, as planned, Mike and Ray met at Dave's flat in South Tottenham. Ray would later state,
He suggested that Mike and I took the car to Glasgow. We left virtually immediately.
Never questioning why.
We went straight through to Glasgow, stopping a couple of times for snacks and arriving by the morning.
That was the new plan. As having already silenced the hostages, they would sell the Lancia for cash. But unbeknownst to Ray, the plan had already changed without him. As by that point, this gang of incompetents were in too deep. The concluding part of In Too Deep continues next week. That's not too bad. Bye, jingo. Hello, everyone. That was almost an Al Pacino. I was watching a bit of Dog Day Afternoon the other day. Good film, very good film. Back in the days when Al Pacino could still act, before he went all shouty. Well, I'm going to take your hat off. There you go, your hat is off. It's pissing down today. Utterly pissing down. So I'm hoping this doesn't sound too horrible. I managed to get rid of Lawnmower Wanker last time. Oh, sorry. Welcome to Extra Mile, the unscripted, unedited bit. Blah, blah, blah. Bit of waffle, cup of tea, quiz, extra stuff about the case. Blah, blah, blah. There we go. If you don't know what I said there, just go to another episode. And I've said it about 100 and odd times now. Pissing down at the moment. Absolutely pissing down. Really, really absolutely pissing down. Windy, rainy. The boat's rocking around the place. So it's going to take a lot of work. But I did manage to get rid of Lawnmower Man off the edit. So hopefully I can get rid of the sound of rain. The only thing I can't seem to get rid of with my new system is parakeets. Parakeets, fucking annoying little birds. Anyway, what else is going on? I'm going to put on a tea. I'm going to put on a peppermint. I'm not going to make much, I don't think, because I'm going to get to my my little coffee shop in a bit. bakery's not open today, but I'm going to get to my little coffee shop, and it's nice. I always go in there, and they're making my hot chocolate before I even get there, and they've already put out the receipt, so they know me. I'm a creature of habit. It's like when Eva goes into bargain booze. You know, they literally just they've still got my credit card because she doesn't pay for it herself, and basically they just load up a trolley with all the really volatile stuff. You know what she's like. So what else is going on? Robin, my little Robin, is still living in my crotch. So that's the front part of the boat under a little cover. Haven't been able to. I don't think there's eggs in there yet because it's too early for eggs. But he's made a little nest. So I was gonna. I'd asked RSPCA to come out to have a look at him, but they're a bit too busy, and it's not really an emergency for them. So I was going to have a little look today to see if there's any eggs, and if there isn't, then I can move the boat. That's fine. But the lock's being fixed in front of me, so even though I'm late by a week, I'm going to be late by another week leaving where I am, because they're fixing a lock. For something it doesn't even need fixing, it's fine. People have been going through. In fact, someone went through it this morning, but apparently they've got to fix it. So I'm stuck here for another week, which is not too bad, which means I'm near the bakery, I'm near the boat bins, it's a nice place. I'm in an area where people seem to think you're in the middle of nowhere, so they avoid it, but actually it's a really nice bit. So that's good. So I will finish these final 2 episodes of Murder Mile here, and that'll be done before December starts, which is great. So I've already started booking in some times and dates to go into the archives in December, which will be good. I might book myself into a little hotel nearby so I don't have to do the lengthy, really ridiculously long commute. I might do that, which will all be good. Thank you to 2 new Patreon subscribers. So thank you very much to Rachel Chilton and Danny Rhodes. So thank you, Rachel and Danny. That's very much appreciated. Goodies are in the post, or I apologise to Anna. Anna got in touch with me recently and said I didn't get my goodies, and then I was like, oh shit. And she's been very kindly been a Patreon subscriber for more than 2 years, I think. So I don't know what happened. I always send them off, but sometimes they just don't turn up. You know, sometimes the postal service can be great, which is great. Sometimes you send stuff off second class and it arrives the next morning, and you're like, well, why should I pay first class? But sometimes, as we've seen, especially if you send stuff to America, American posties tend to look at the shape of a mug and they think, oh my god, that looks like a football, not a proper football, one of those odd footballs, American football. And you go, oh my god, I'm gonna throw this across the world, a touchdown, yeah! And the mug turns up smashed. So, but sometimes things just don't turn up, so which is very annoying. So, I've just sent off some goodies to Anna, so hopefully you would have got them by now, because you'll be listening to this in a month's time, because I'm a month ahead, as I am at the moment. So there we go. Is my kettle almost done? Almost. I'm going to do some quiz questions. I might break partway through. So quiz questions, get ready. We'll answer them shortly. Question number 1: what year was Falmouth House built? Question number 2: what park does the flat overlook? These are all really easy. Question number 3. What was Michael's first wife's name? Question number 4. Where did Janet's dad work? Ooh. Question number 5. At which studio did Janet get a screen test? Question number 6. On what Mediterranean island did Michael and Janet honeymoon? Question number 7. Where was the Arthur Murray Dance School based? You can name street, or we can name a number if you want to be smart about it. Question number 8. What jobs were Dave, Ray and Mike doing at the time of the robbery? And question number 9, because I forgot to do a question number 10. What football ground was nearest to the sub-post office that they tried to rob? I should have done extra ones, a 10th one, and I thought I'd done a 10th one, but I clearly have forgotten to do it. Let's go and grab my cuppa. Oh, I'm going to put on my fingerless gloves, because it's cold, it's wintry, it's not quite winter yet, it's autumn, the leaves are out, my boat is covered in leaves, I clean them off every day and they get recovered. It's been raining for days, it's really cold. Luckily, Mr. Robin is okay, so that's alright. Oh dear, this is almost done. And There we go. I don't know why I'm making myself a tea, because, as always, I don't drink in front of the microphone, because I know people don't like that, so I don't do it deliberately. But also, by the time I finish this, I always head off to the coffee shop anyway. So, last night I was recording the sounds of I think it was a tawny owl, and what sounded like a muntjac deer having a conversation, which was interesting. I didn't have good equipment, I just grabbed my phone, but it's just nice hearing the sounds of an owl and a muntjac having a bit of a chat. So let's dive into some stuff about this case. Don't forget, because this is a two-parter, and we conclude it next week. I don't want to give away too much, so there won't be too much exciting information here. But also, don't forget, I might balls up some of the quiz questions, which I do. So, flat 35, Falmouth House on the Bayswater Road. Police in their report didn't give normally they do a planogram of exactly which flat it was and where the flat was, and they did a nice photo of the outside of the flats, but they never explained exactly which the flat was, so that took me a good long while to work it out. I knew it was on the 5th floor, but I didn't know what number 35 was, but it's for sale, and the details are online, so it was really good. I was able to work out the size of the flat and where it would be, and I worked out it was a corner one, and then they had a view from the balcony, and out of the balcony I could see that it was Hyde Park, and I could see the tower, the guards tower over in the distance, over in Knightsbridge, so I was able to work out exactly which one it was just from that. Hooray! Well done, Michael, for your... I mean, it's not important for the story, but for me, when I'm filming little videos and taking the pictures, it's nice to stand outside the building and know exactly which one you're looking at. Otherwise, it's just... You might as well just say, in this building was a murder. A man got murdered and it was bad. I'd rather be able to see exactly which room it is and work everything out. But yeah, so they bought it. Is this a quiz question? Nope. Yeah, they bought it for about 20 grand. It's on sale, so that would have been the equivalent of £480,000 today, so almost £500,000. Luxury flat, overlooking described as exceptionally well guarded. We'll see about that in next week's episode. But as mentioned, you've got to get through an intercom on the door. It's not one of the ones with a camera, because this is 1960s, so it's too early for that. But it is a, hello, who is it? Oh, okay, I'll let you in. You've got to go past the porters. You've got to go through the lift. There's not security cameras in that era. There is now. But it's pretty well protected. There's even a security bell inside each of the rooms. So if you need the porter's assistance, you just ring it. So yeah, it's a nice place, expensive. So Michael St. John O'Carroll, 53 years old, city stockbroker, a senior partner of Carroll & Co. Try not to give away too much, because there's too much in there, and there's also some questions. He had separated from his wife, whose name is a quiz question. Well done, Michael. 12 months prior, and divorce proceedings were taking place. It was going to be the 31st of March they were going to get divorced. So that is about 2.5 weeks after when he got murdered. I mean, not really a spoiler, because I mentioned at the start of the episode there was double murder, so you kind of know that. If you hadn't twigged that, come on. He had split from her. She kept the house in Wimbledon with their 2 children, their 2 teenage boys. But she said she didn't really know much about Janet, except she had taken my husband's name. His wife had not seen her husband for some time. She said he had left some time ago, and all I know about the girl is that I've just read that she had taken his name. Janet Williams. She was going by the name of Janet O'Carroll. She changed her name by deed poll, as mentioned in the episode. We will get to that very shortly. So she's born in the summer of 1942. Humble beginnings. Second youngest of 5, 3 daughters and 2 sons. I almost said 3 daughters and 2 sisters then. one of whom, Joan, was her older sister, and she was a nurse as well, which is why she may have gone into nursing as well. She seemed to do quite well at school, secondary school. She was a fine athlete. She was in the school hockey team. She was school prefect, which is kind of the, when you're a goody two shoes, you become the prefect. She was an auxiliary nurse for a bit, as mentioned, at Hereford County Hospital, trained as an English and a PE teacher in various parts of London. But she really, really wanted to become an actress. Someone said that she looked pretty, so there she become a model. Actually, inside the flat are lots of different pictures of her as a model as well. So if you're a patron subscriber, you get to see those. Become a patron subscriber for almost. People do say, but when they because I post stuff that you won't see anywhere else, and I share little bits online, social media, because you have to. I hate social media, but all the really good stuff is all safe for Patreon. It's all in there, hidden away. So let's dive into these guys. Raymond David Cohen, 23, was as a job, I'm not going to tell you what, lived 20 West Side in Wandsworth with his father. Everyone knows him as Ray. One of the porters described him as 5'9", early 20s, jet black hair curled back at the back, brushed back, and he wore dark rimmed glasses. He was broad-shouldered and wearing a grey tweedy suit. He sounded educated and was expensively dressed. I haven't put descriptions of Ray, Mike, and Dave in there because they all came in at the same time. Everyone is describing them, but at no point does anyone seem to say this is that one and this is that one. So and because I haven't got any pictures of them, it's hard for me to boil that down. So I've kept that vague, but we kind of know who they are, really. What else have we got? David Colvin Bolton. He was the older one, 30, the ballroom dancer. Lived with his wife in South Tottenham. All of these guys were pretty much born in London. He's 6 foot tall, slim, looked younger than he was. People said he was kind of mid-20s, but he wasn't. He was 30s. Again, brush back hair and a light suit. With these guys, I went in a couple of times and pulled out the court records and the police files because I was desperate to get their... Because always in there will be their criminal records from the past. Because I was like, what is their criminal records? But they're not in there. Whether they weren't put in the police file, they would certainly have been used in the trial itself, but it's not in there. But so, from what I could work out in a lot of the witness statements and things like that, they were the kind of minor crimes that they'd done before. Attempts at crimes, but they were never good at what they did. They were a little bit baffling. Michael David Ellis was the one that he referred to as Mike. It makes it difficult in the story because we've got a Michael and a Mike. Two Michaels. So even though everyone called Michael David Ellis, I've called him Mike in this because it just makes it easier by calling everyone by their first name. He lived at 10 Cambolt Road in Putney. He also lived with his parents as well. He's hard to describe because his description is 5'7", medium build, and everyone seems to say that he was forgettable. He was the one that no one could really remember, which is why he doesn't appear that much in this book. This isn't the book, Michael. This is a podcast. In this podcast, but we know that he had stolen checks. We will learn more about. You'll learn more about Mike and Ray in the next episode, so that's more about them. Michael and Janet, we know that she was working as an escort. She'd kind of lost interest in her modelling career and her acting career. It didn't seem to be going well. She'd started to call herself Janet O'Carroll and Janet Carroll. That was her modelling name. By that point, she'd already married Michael O'Carroll. He uses the name Carroll. Because don't forget, this is 1960s. There's a lot of kind of anti-Irish sentiment along there. So even though he's of Irish stock, he's using the name Carroll as opposed to O'Carroll, which doesn't really make it sound less Irish, does it? It's like difference between Riley and O'Reilly. So as mentioned, the divorce was meant to be going ahead 31st of March. 11 days after the murder, police found a certificate in the flat of a marriage between Michael and Janet. It stated that they were married 27th of October 1967, so 5 to 6 months earlier. She told friends that they planned to be married. Can't say that because that's a quiz question. Police were later unable to find the registrar by name given on the marriage licence, and they believe that it was an arranged marriage to convince Michael's family that the relationship with Janet was respectable. Her family seems to get on well with him. His family don't seem to get on with her. I think because he left, she was already single anyway, so that's fine for them. But he was married with children, and he was going through a divorce, so that kind of made everything a bit bad. She was roughly 5 months pregnant around the time, which would have put the time of conception around the time of the honeymoon. They got 2 cars, which you've already mentioned. We'll dive into that. They come up again in the next week's episode, so we've got more to dive into that. But they lived very well and expensively. Even to the point where, in a lot of the press, they were trying to pin down Michael and Janet's final movements, and they were trying to work out where they were the night before, because they'd been out dining, and they thought it might be connected to that. We'll find out next week. They moved in together. They moved in September 1967. They regularly spent weekends away at Janet's country cottage, and went to see her family over in Hereford. As mentioned earlier on, they went to see her father, and her father said, "I've never seen a couple so happy and well suited." Meeting David Bolton. So I had fun with that, tried to slip that in and make it sound like it was just a normal, because it's amazing, isn't it? It's a normal everyday thing. This is just a couple who are preparing to they're already married, but they want to get married properly. They need the divorce to come through so they can turn around and go, right, we're legally married under English law, therefore she's legally my wife, everything's kosher, and therefore they were prepping for that. They were prepping for the marriage. Therefore, they wanted to do that dance. So they went to the Arthur Morris School, where it is the answer to one of the questions. They enrolled 29th of November 1967 for an introductory course of 4 lessons of ballroom dancing. They did that on the 7th, 13th, 21st and 28th of December. Then signed up for another 8 courses. From the 15th of February, they decided to do a further 10 courses as they were getting better, and their supervisor was a Mr. David Bolton. They were taught separately for the first 7, and then the rest of them they were taught together. David Bolton seems to like them, they seem to like him. He seems to be a good dance instructor. We don't know much about his past, about where he comes from and why he's a dance instructor, but we know that Janet knew him as she was a dance hostess previously, so that's how they met, which is why they liked him and they invited him along to their flat. Ray had known Michael Ellis for about 6 months, so around the time that Janet and Michael moved in together, that's when they started becoming friends. Michael Ellis introduced Raymond Cohen to David Bolton in early March. Now, going through Raymond's statements, he said, "I was introduced to Mr. Bolton by Mr. Ellis." He uses Mr. Bolton and Mr. Ellis all the time on this. He's very polite. About 2 weeks ago. So Ray had only known Dave 2 weeks, and he'd only known Mike 6 months. Not much, and not particularly good, given the fact that they're not particularly well versed in skills, unless, of course, the skills that they needed were, well, I'm not going to say what the skills were, because that's one of the quiz questions. What else we got? February 1968, 1 month before the murders, David Bolton lost his job at the dance school. We don't know why. We know he was £50 in rent arrears, which is about 950 quid today. So not really a hell of a lot. Not a fortune, really. And I'm sure he could have got a more legitimate job elsewhere to kind of pay off the rents. But he didn't, and he was in the process of being evicted. His landlord, Harry, I can't remember what Harry's surname was. I've got it written down here somewhere. was going to Harry Stock, that's it, the landlord, was putting in an eviction notice on the 14th of February 1969. Therefore, with 28 days left, he was pretty much running out of time. So the 12th to 13th would have been the days that he was close to being evicted. That's why he kind of pushed it at that moment. It was, they came up with the plan, they tried to burgle the sub post office. That failed, which is why it kind of led into, right, next morning we're going to rob these people. There was no waiting around. There was all kind of a panic for it, and it was all because he was going to be evicted. Kind of really silly, really silly. What else we got? I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? He could have gone to Citizens Advice and said, "Oh, I need more time," and they could have gone, "Right, we can help negotiate an extra couple of weeks or something." Saturday, the 2nd of March 1968, Michael and Janet invited David Bolton to a party at their flat. He was in attendance. Pretty much, he was given access to everything. The whole flat. It's a 3-bedroom flat, and he believed that everything, kind of all the jewellery, was worth 15 to 20 grand, which it was not. Also at the party was Patricia Merrifield, who was a dance instructor at the same place, who knew him and went with him to the party. I didn't put in her in it because it just kind of muddies the waters. We don't need to know about her. She's not involved in the crime at all. She said they arrived about 8:30. We got in through the front door. We rang the bell. Somebody answered. David Bolton, who said it was him, and the door was opened. It was She said it was relatively low security. He was trusted, as he was an instructor and a social friend. When we arrived, Mr. O'Carroll took our coats. The atmosphere was friendly. It was a well-sized flat, and the guests had access to all the rooms. It was a small flat, so it's not really a problem. But obviously, he doesn't really acknowledge the significance of this at the moment. But if you think about it, going to that party for him was like a dress rehearsal. He's walking around the flat. He's got free access to it. He can see. This is the only part of this story which is actually of his planning, which actually works, is the fact that he'd already been in that flat and he'd already seen around. So instead of knocking on the door and going in and going, "Right, I'm burgling the place. Oh, do you have a telly? You got a telly? That is good. I will think about the telly." He's seen it. He's had a look around. The problem is because he doesn't know jewellery and he doesn't know the price of things that he could fence. He hasn't really assessed it that properly. So yeah. Dave had mooted the idea of doing this about 2 days before. So the Saturday, this is the week after the party, but a couple of days before the burglary itself, he'd mentioned it to them. To Dave and not Dave, to Ray and Mike. And he'd mentioned it to him, and they'd kind of taken it on board and said, "Yeah, do you know, it's possibly something we could do." But what they really wanted to do was the sub post office. Because if you think about it, the sub post office was, in case you don't know, a sub post office is, quite often we have them here. You can have a main post office, which is kind of a post office you go to, but a sub post office can be something inside something else. So inside a newsagent, it can also be inside someone's house. But that normally means that the opening hours are a little bit smaller, less kind of manageable. But for them it was fine because the sub postmaster would be out. Therefore they could break into this person's house, steal his keys, and because part of the post office was in his house, they knew that the safe would be there and it'd be full of goodies. But they absolutely ballsed it up because there were utter numpties. I know there's a lot of people out there who gangsters, yeah, gangsters, love gangsters. But every time I read stories about gangsters, they're just twats, aren't they? They're just morons who can't do a proper job. Therefore, gangsters, yeah, respect, yeah, all that. But it's not. They're just twats who are incapable of doing anything. Therefore, they have to steal. And most of the time, they cock it up. There's a really good book if you read the book by Joseph Pistone, who was Donnie Brasco. If you read the book that he co-wrote about his life as Donnie Brasco, it's brilliant because it's It's not, oh, gangsters, yeah, like that. He's like, he goes on about how boring it is, how gangster life is just boring and full of shit, and just people up their own arse and making claims about things that they haven't done, and you just go, oh, so desperate. People, needy bastards, needy for attention. So, yeah, I don't know how I got onto the conversation of gangsters. What else is there? Yeah, no, so it was pretty much. So after they'd made it back from the sub post office about 4 a.m. back to Dave's flat, and there they had, so he was going to be evicted pretty much the next day. Yeah, it would have been the next day pretty much. So he was desperate. So that's why he came up with the plan that morning, and it was literally like, right, 11 o'clock, we're gonna rob the O'Carrolls, knowing that, well, not even knowing, guessing that Michael would be out, and guessing that Janet would be in. She didn't have a job by that point. She wasn't modelling. He probably would have chatted to her when they were dancing, asking her about her day. So he's probably got all the information about that. Pros and cons. Easy for him to get in. He knew the layout. She was a pregnant woman, so probably easy to overpower. Risks. The only way that he could be let in, not having a key, is for her to let him in, and therefore she would need to hear his voice and see his face and know him and be able to identify him. So that makes it all really difficult. But as mentioned in the episode, because they only had 6 hours between having decided to do it and actually doing the crime itself, they hadn't got a plan. They were winging it. They hadn't got anything to bind them, nothing to gag them, no disguises, no tools, no bags, just nothing. I mean, they just winged it. And even worse, they have no... Given the fact that she has to see his face, what the fuck did he think that she was going to do afterwards? Did she think she was going to go, oh, okay, that's fine, you nick our stuff and we'll just let you go? It's like one thing that I thought of, so I put the reference to balaclavas in there. He could have made his way past the guys on reception. You know, you could put on a hat and gloves and a scarf and things like that. Go, oh, bro, isn't it chilly outside? And work your way in. Oh, I'm here to see the O'Carrolls and be let up. That's not a problem. But when you're going up in the lift, put on the balaclavas. Because obviously he knocks on the door and says, oh, hi, Janet, it's me. But, or he could have gone, it's the porter. You know, it doesn't make sense to get yourself in there and have her see him, and how's he going to get away? Just the incompetence of it. But also, I'm guessing the arrogance as well, because he was quite an arrogant man. I think that's it. I don't want to give away too much, because we've got a lot to cover next week. Next week will just utterly baffling. Let's do the answers to the quiz questions. 9 quiz questions. Let's hope I didn't balls any of them up. I don't think I did. So here we go. What year was Falmouth House built? 1960. Question number 2. What park does the flat overlook? Hyde Park. Question number 3. What was Michael's first wife's name? It was Claire. Question number 4. What did Janet's dad do as a job? He worked at a parcel delivery depot. Question number 5. At which studio did Janet get her screen test? It was Pinewood Studios. Question number 6. On which Mediterranean island did they honeymoon? It was Elba. Question number 7. Where was the Arthur Murray Dance School based? It was 167 Oxford Street, which, if you're going along Oxford Street, it's now where the big Marks and Spencer's is. Question number 8. What jobs did Dave, Ray and Mike do at the time of the robbery? It was a trick question. They were all unemployed. There you go. Let's hope did you fall for that one? I don't know. And question number 9, our final question, because I ballsed up. What football ground was nearest to the sub post office they tried to rob? Ugh. It was Brentford, which I pass on the way to the archives. There we go. So that's me done. Hope you enjoyed that. Next week is the final part of our two-parter, so I hope you enjoy that. And then that takes us to the start of the break. By that point, I would have already done archive stuff. I'm trying to get myself ahead of the game. Archive stuff, done what I need to do. It'll be Christmas. There'll be hopefully a Christmas episode. And then January, I'm going to go offline. Offline. Give myself a break because I think I need it. I'm exhausted. My brain is almost frazzled, so I need to offline soon. So I hope you enjoyed that, folks. I'm going to go out into the rain and grab my I can't talk. I'm going to grab my hot chocolate. Yummy. And I might even get a cake with them. It's all tax deductible, you know. So have yourself a good week, folks. Stay safe and be good. Thanks for supporting the show. Cheers. Bye-bye. Oops. Oh, switch off.